The training pit smelled like metal and fear. The air was hot, heavy with the buzz of energy fences, the sharp scent of burned ozone, and the quiet tremor of a monster's breathing. Every new recruit stood at the rim, silent and stiff, their eyes locked on the creature that crouched in the center of the pit. It was a beast made for killing. Its skin was black like wet stone, thick and scaled, rippling with muscle. It had 4 legs, 2 clawed forearms, and a mouth filled with curved, silver teeth that could crush armor plating. The low rumble that came from its throat was deep enough to make the ground vibrate. The alien recruits, a mix of species from across the galaxy, kept a safe distance. They'd all heard the stories. This was a Zythurian Warbeast, a creature that didn't obey, didn't think, didn't even hesitate. It existed to destroy anything that moved. The trainer, a tall, six-eyed insectoid with chitin armor and a voice like broken glass, paced along the pit's edge. His name was Viarik, a veteran of 20 campaigns. His mandibles clicked sharply as he spoke. "Do not move when it looks at you," he said, voice echoing through the hangar-sized room. "Do not breathe loud, do not make sound. It'll bite anyone who moves." The silence that followed was thick and trembling. And then from the back row, someone coughed. Heads turned. The sound came from a lone figure standing slightly apart from the others, a human. He looked ordinary compared to the rest. No armor plates, no claws, no scales. Just a sweat-stained training uniform, short brown hair, and a tired expression that said he'd seen worse than this. His name tag read E. Vance. Private Elias Vance scratched the back of his neck, frowned, and squinted down into the pit. "That thing," he said, his voice rough and casual. "You call that a training partner?" The alien recruits recoiled as if he'd spat fire. The trainer's mandibles spread in disbelief. "Silence, human," Viarik snapped. "That thing is a weapon. You move, it kills. You speak, it hears you breathe, and you die." Vance tilted his head. The Warbeast's 6 glowing eyes turned toward him, slow and deliberate. It rose slightly on its front limbs, air hissing from its nostrils. Everyone froze. Vance didn't. He sighed, rubbed his face, and muttered, Yeah, big, scary monster, seen worse on Earth after a football game." The trainer's antennae stiffened in shock. "You will stand still now." But Vance was already walking closer to the edge of the pit. His boots scraped softly against the floor. Every eye followed him. Every breath seemed to stop. The Warbeast's muscles bunched like drawn cables. Its tail twitched once, slicing the air. Viarik hissed, "You fool, stop, it'll." The beast lunged. A blur of claws and teeth, faster than thought. The air cracked with the force of it. The recruits screamed. The energy fence flashed bright blue, then dimmed again. When the light cleared, Elias Vance was still standing there. He hadn't moved an inch. The Warbeast's head was inches from his chest, saliva dripping from jaws the size of a man's torso. And the human was smiling. He didn't draw a weapon, he didn't back away. Slowly he crouched until his eyes were level with the creature. The beast's nostrils flared, breath hot and ragged. "Hey," Vance said softly. "You don't really want to bite me, do you? You're just scared." No one breathed. Even the alarms in the far bay seemed to quiet down. The Warbeast blinked, once, twice. The low growl in its chest softened, uncertain. The trainer stared in disbelief. You speak to it." Vance shrugged. "Nah, just talking to myself helps me think." He stretched out a hand, open and steady. The other recruits gasped, one shouting, "He's insane." Maybe he was, but Vance didn't care. He'd been through worse than this. He'd seen real monsters before, monsters that wore uniforms, that smiled while they burned cities. Compared to them, this one just looked lonely. The beast sniffed, sharp and fast. A growl bubbled up again, but this time it sounded more like confusion than rage. It leaned in, its breath ruffling the front of Vance's uniform. "Yeah," he murmured. "Didn't think you were evil. You're just tired, huh? They keep you in this box, poke you with sticks, tell you to hate anything that moves." The trainer's claws twitched. "Step away, human, it's reading your heartbeat. One wrong move and—" Vance ignored him. "Easy, big guy," he said softly. "I'm not moving, just scratching my head. You can do that too if you had hands." A low rumble came from the creature's throat, deep but not threatening this time. Its breathing slowed. Its eyes, still fixed on Vance, flickered from bright gold to a dull amber. Something changed. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then slowly, the Warbeast lowered its head to the ground. Every soldier watching froze in disbelief. The trainer's antennae trembled. It submitted. Vance looked back, smirking faintly. Nah, just realized I'm not worth eating. Laughter broke out among the humans. The aliens didn't laugh, they couldn't believe it. Viarik stood motionless, staring at the impossible sight before him. A Zythurian Warbeast calm in front of a creature it should have killed. Vance stood up, brushing the dust off his knees. You know, he said, you guys really ought to stop threatening it, probably just wants a nap. The trainer's voice came out low, almost awed. Humans, you have no sense of fear. Elias looked back at the beast, which was watching him with those strange, flickering eyes. He smiled quietly. Not true, he said. We're scared all the time, we just move anyway. The trainer didn't answer. None of them did. The Warbeast let out one last rumble, something that almost sounded like a sigh, and rested its head against the floor. And in that heavy silence, for the first time in the history of Zythurian training, the monster didn't bite anyone who moved. It just watched the human walk away. For the rest of that day, no one spoke to the human. After what happened in the pit, the recruits didn't know if they were supposed to fear him or worship him. The Warbeast, Threx, as the trainer called it, had gone silent. No growls, no strikes, no snapping jaws, just silence. It sat in its pen, staring toward the observation deck where the human had stood. The trainer, Viarik, tried to hide his unease behind a shell of military discipline, but his antennae twitched every few seconds. Even for a seasoned veteran, what had happened defied logic. He had seen warriors reduced to red mist by that creature, and yet somehow that fragile human had walked away untouched. Coincidence, he muttered to himself, tapping commands into his datapad. The beast was tired, that is all. But deep down, he didn't believe it. Elias Vance was back in the barracks, sitting on the edge of his bunk, staring at the calluses on his hands. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt curious. Something about the creature's eyes had stayed with him. There had been pain there, not hate, not hunger, just pain. He leaned back against the wall, letting the faint hum of the ventilation system fill the silence. Around him, the alien recruits whispered in low voices. They used words he didn't understand, but their tone was clear, fear and confusion. Finally, one of them spoke up. A tall, green-scaled warrior from the Vralk system stepped forward. His voice was deep and careful. Human, what are you? Vance looked up, blinking. Just a guy, he said, same as you. The alien shook his head slowly. No, I've seen men die screaming from less. You stood before the Zythurian and lived. It should have ripped you apart. Elias shrugged. Guess it didn't feel like it. He meant it as a joke, but no one laughed. Later, when the lights dimmed for night cycle, Vance found himself walking the corridors of the training complex. His boots echoed softly against the metal floor. He should have been asleep, but he couldn't stop thinking about the creature. He stopped at the observation window overlooking the pit. The massive room below was dark except for the faint red glow of the beast's containment field. And there it was, Threx. The creature lay curled like a mountain of shadows, its breathing slow but restless. Its eyes were open, glowing faintly in the dark. Vance placed his hand on the glass. Hey, big guy, he whispered, you still awake? The beast lifted its head slightly. The motion was smooth, almost gentle. For a second, Vance could swear it recognized him. The security door hissed open behind him. Human. Viarik's voice was sharp but quiet. He stepped into the light, mandibles clicking. You should not be here. Vance didn't look away from the glass. I just wanted to check on him. Viarik corrected. That is not a him, it is a weapon. It does not think, it does not feel, it kills. Vance turned his head. Maybe that's the problem. The trainer narrowed his eyes. You dare question thousands of years of warfare? Yeah, Vance said simply, because I've seen what happens when you treat something like a weapon long enough. Eventually it believes you. For a long moment, the two stood in silence. The faint hum of the energy barrier filled the air. Finally, Viarik said, if you continue this foolishness, you will die. The creature will not hesitate again. Maybe, Vance said, pushing away from the glass, but I don't plan on giving it a reason to. The next day, the recruits were called to the pit again. Viarik's orders were clear. Today, they would practice movement drills under the beast's presence. This will test your nerve, the trainer announced. You must not react, you must control your fear. The Warbeast was restrained by energy fields, each one glowing bright blue. It looked restless, tail lashing slowly, claws scraping against the metal floor. Vance stood at the back of the group, watching quietly. He could see how its eyes darted between the recruits, sharp, alert, mistrustful. When the first alien recruit stepped forward, the beast growled, deep and dangerous. The alien froze. "Continue," Viaric ordered. I can't," the recruit stammered, trembling. The trainer hissed in disgust, "Pathetic." Vance stepped forward before anyone could stop him. "Let me try." The trainer's antennae twitched in alarm. "No, you've already." But the human was already moving. He walked slowly down the ramp into the pit, each step calm and deliberate. The recruits whispered in disbelief. "Human," Viaric barked, "you'll get yourself killed." Vance ignored him. His boots touched the floor of the pit. The Warbeast's head turned toward him instantly. It was watching, waiting. Vance raised both hands, palms open. "Hey again, Threx." The name slipped out before he realized it. The creature's nostrils flared. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's your name, isn't it, Threx?" For a moment, the Warbeast just breathed low and slow. Then it took one heavy step forward. The ground trembled. Gasps rippled through the room. Vance didn't move. "That's it," he whispered, "one step at a time." Another step, then another. The energy barrier flickered as the beast drew close. Viaric's hand hovered over the emergency control, ready to raise the field to full power. "Human," he shouted, "back away." But Vance shook his head. "If you do that, it'll think you're hurting me." The trainer froze, confused. "Hurting you?" "Yeah," Vance said, eyes never leaving the creature. "He doesn't hate us, he just doesn't trust us yet." The beast was so close now that Vance could feel the heat of its breath. He looked up, and their eyes met, human brown and alien gold. Something passed between them. The Warbeast's growl faded. Its claws sank into the metal floor, steady and calm. And then, slowly, unbelievably, it lowered its massive head until its snout was inches from Vance's chest. The human reached out and touched it. The entire room went silent. Viaric's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Impossible." Vance smiled faintly. "Just takes a little patience." He kept his hand on the creature's snout, feeling the slow rhythm of its breathing, the faint pulse beneath the scales. "See," he said softly, "not so scary when you stop trying to scare it first." And for the first time since its capture, the Warbeast didn't growl. It simply stayed. Still, calm, watching the human who dared to move when everyone else was afraid. The base buzzed with talk of the human and the beast. In the canteen, in the barracks, in the long corridors filled with echoing footsteps, everyone whispered the same thing. The human had touched the Zythurian Warbeast and lived. To some it was a miracle, to others madness. The alien recruits looked at Elias Vance differently now. Some stared with quiet respect, others with open suspicion. A few even stepped aside when he passed. He didn't like it, but he understood. Fear made people strange. The trainer, Viaric, hadn't spoken to him since the last test. Not a single word. But every time Vance entered the training pit, he could feel those 6 eyes watching him, calculating, trying to understand what made him different. Vance didn't think he was special. He just thought the universe was full of scared creatures trying to survive. Some looked human, some had claws and scales. But fear was the same in every language. That morning the base was quiet except for the low hum of the power systems. Vance stood in front of the observation window again, arms crossed. Below, the Warbeast, Threx, was packing. Its claws clicked against the metal floor. The energy fences still shimmered blue, but Vance could tell they weren't needed anymore. He turned as Viaric entered, datapad in hand. "You've been down here every morning," the trainer said coldly. "Explain." Vance shrugged. He doesn't like being alone. "It's," Viaric corrected again, "not he." The human didn't answer. The trainer clicked his mandibles in irritation. "Your behavior is dangerous. You are teaching the others to doubt procedure. You cannot train a Zythurian. It has no mind for mercy." Vance's gaze drifted back to the beast. "You ever tried mercy first?" Viaric froze, antennae twitching. "Mercy doesn't win wars, human." Vance sighed. "Neither does fear." Later that day, the alarm for combat simulation echoed through the corridors. All recruits were ordered to the pit for evaluation. When Vance arrived, he saw a row of mechanical drones lined up, training bots, armed with shock rifles and glowing eyes. Behind them stood the towering doors of the beast's pen. Viarik addressed the recruits with his usual authority. Today, you will witness what true power looks like. The Warbeast will demonstrate controlled destruction. He gestured toward Vance, and since our human seems so eager to understand it, he will join us in the pit. The recruits gasped. Vance raised an eyebrow. You serious? Completely, Viarik said, his tone almost mocking. You will observe from the ground. Do not move. Do not interfere. Let this be a lesson in why your softness has no place here. Vance bit back a sigh. Fine, let's see what happens. The gates hissed open. Threx stepped into the pit, chains clanking around its legs, muscles coiled and tense. The drones activated, hovering forward with whirring wings and raised rifles. The trainer's voice echoed through the speakers. Begin simulation. The air exploded with sound. The drones fired first, bolts of bright energy slamming into the beast's armor-like hide. Threx roared, staggering under the first impacts, then lunged forward with terrifying speed. It ripped one drone in half with a single swipe. Sparks flew. Another drone fired a missile. The explosion lit the pit like a sun. The creature vanished in smoke and fire. When it reappeared, its eyes were glowing white-hot with fury. The recruits shouted in alarm. Vance's chest tightened. Viarik, that's enough. The trainer's voice came back sharp. This is a test. Of what? How fast it can die? But the human didn't wait for an answer. He vaulted the railing and dropped into the pit. The impact sent pain shooting up his legs, but he ran forward anyway. Threx, he shouted, easy, it's me. The Warbeast swung around, wild and panicked, blood streaming from a wound on its shoulder. For a moment it didn't see him, just movement, just threat. Then its gaze locked onto his face. Its claws stopped inches from his chest. The drones kept firing. Vance spun, lifted a fallen rifle, and shot one clean out of the air. Back off, he yelled. Stand down. Viarik's voice shouted over the speakers. Human, you're interfering with military procedure. Your procedure, about to get us both killed. Vance fired again, hitting another drone. He dropped the weapon, ducked behind Threx's side, and pressed a hand to its flank. The creature trembled under his touch, breathing fast and heavy. You're okay, he whispered. You're not trapped, you're not alone. The Warbeast's massive body heaved, chest rising and falling like thunder. Then slowly the tension left its muscles. The glow in its eyes faded. Viarik stared from the control room, frozen. The entire simulation had gone silent. No roars, no gunfire, only the soft sound of the human's voice. Good, Vance said softly. That's it, it's over. Threx lowered its head, resting it beside him. When the smoke cleared, Vance stood with one hand still on the beast's hide. The recruits were silent. Even the trainer had no words. Finally, Viarik descended from the observation platform, steps clicking against the metal floor. He stopped a few feet from the human. You calmed it, he said, voice low. It obeyed you. Vance shook his head. Didn't obey, just listened. Viarik stared at him for a long moment, his mandibles twitching in thought. You are reckless, human, but... He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Perhaps not foolish. He turned away sharply. Enough for today. The recruits began to disperse, whispering among themselves. Some looked at the human with awe now, others with disbelief. Vance stayed behind, sitting on the floor beside Threx. The creature shifted slightly, lowering itself to rest more comfortably. Its eyes half closed, almost peaceful. Vance smiled. Guess we're stuck with each other, huh? The beast rumbled softly, a low sound that almost resembled a purr. Yeah, Vance said quietly. Didn't think so either. He looked up through the smoke-stained ceiling at the faint light filtering down from above. For the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't felt since leaving Earth. Hope. The sky above Outpost Theta was quiet that night. Too quiet. Private Elias Vance stood on the outer deck, watching the stars. They burned cold and steady, millions of them like sparks frozen in the void. Somewhere out there, he knew, war was still raging, worlds burning, fleets vanishing. But here, on this lonely rock at the edge of Alliance space, things had been calm for weeks. Too calm. Threx slept in his pen below, curled up like a mountain of muscle and scales. Every few minutes, the creature shifted, letting out a soft rumble that vibrated through the floor. Vance smiled faintly, resting his arms on the railing. "Don't snore too loud, big guy," he muttered. "You'll scare the stars." He didn't know why he said things like that. Maybe because talking to Threx made the silence easier to bear, or maybe because he'd stopped thinking of the beast as a monster. It was just a friend. He rubbed the scar on his arm, the one he'd gotten during the first day's training. That felt like years ago now. The others still kept their distance from both of them, though not as much as before. The recruits had begun to see the truth. The human and the Warbeast were no longer enemies. They were partners. The peace shattered just before dawn. The alarm screamed first, a sharp, piercing wail that turned blood cold. Then came the tremors. The ground shook under his boots as explosions echoed from the valley below. "Enemy contact," someone shouted over the intercom. "Unknown fleet dropping from warp, multiple signatures close." Vance bolted toward the hangar. Red lights flashed through the corridors as soldiers scrambled into gear. The air smelled of ozone and fear. When he reached the command deck, Viarik was already there, barking orders at the comm officers. "Deploy the turrets, get every fighter in the air." "What's happening?" Vance demanded. Viarik's antennae snapped toward him. "The Dravek, they found us, fleet strength unknown but large, we cannot hold." Vance's stomach twisted. "What about the lower pens, Threx's sector?" "Forget the beast," Viarik snapped. "We must evacuate." Vance froze. "You're leaving him." "It's not a him," Viarik hissed. "It's a weapon and a liability. The enemy will destroy it along with the base. We must save what lives we can." But Vance was already gone. He sprinted down the corridor, smoke curling from the ceiling vents as the floor quaked under another bombardment. The lights flickered. Sirens howled. When he reached the lower levels, the security gate was half collapsed. He forced it open with a grunt, sliding through the gap into the holding bay. The sight stopped him cold. Threx's pen had been hit. The far wall was caved in, fires burning along the wrecked energy conduits. The beast was trapped beneath a fallen beam the size of a shuttle wing, its scales torn and bleeding dark ichor. "Threx," Vance shouted. The Warbeast lifted its head weakly, letting out a low, pained growl. Vance rushed forward, grabbing the edge of the beam. It was impossibly heavy. The metal seared his palms, but he didn't stop. He set his shoulder under it, muscles screaming, legs trembling. "Come on," he grunted. "I'm not leaving you." The beam shifted a few inches, then stopped. Vance roared and pushed again, vision going white with strain. Every muscle in his body burned. He didn't care. He had promised himself something long ago. He wouldn't lose another friend. Finally, with a thunderous crack, the beam rolled aside. Threx lay still for a moment, breathing hard. Then, with a deep groan, it moved. One wing twitched, then another. The beast slowly rose, shaking off debris like dust. Vance stumbled back, coughing from the smoke. "You okay, big guy?" The Warbeast blinked, golden eyes locking on him. It gave a low, rumbling sound, half pain, half gratitude. "Good," Vance said, forcing a grin. "Because we gotta move. The whole base is coming down." Outside, the world was chaos. Enemy dropships filled the sky, black and sharp like blades. Plasma fire rained down, lighting the mountains in orange and blue. The air was full of screams and static. Vance ran for the exit ramp, Threx limping behind him. Explosions shook the ground with every step. They reached the open air just as a Dravek gunship swooped low, engines screaming. Vance raised his rifle, firing bursts at the cockpit. The rounds sparked harmlessly against the armor. "Yeah," he muttered, "that figures." The gunship turned, its cannons charging. The sound built like thunder. Then a shadow moved. Threx lunged forward, wings snapping wide despite their damage. The creature slammed into the gunship's side, claws tearing through metal like paper. The explosion threw Vance to the ground. When he looked up, the gunship was a flaming wreck, and Threx stood over it, smoke rising from its scales. The beast turned its head toward him, eyes burning. Vance smiled. "Guess you still got some fight in you." Threx let out a low, rolling roar that shook the valley. They ran together toward the command tower, dodging falling debris. Vance fired at anything that moved, his lungs burning from smoke. He saw soldiers retreating into escape pods, ships lifting off, but the sky was full of enemy fire. Viarik, he shouted through the comm. You still alive up there? The trainer's voice crackled through static. Human, you're supposed to be on the evacuation transports. Not without my partner, Vance growled. We can hold them long enough for the rest to escape. You'll die. Maybe, Vance said, glancing at Threx, but not before they do. They reached the ridge overlooking the valley. The Dravek ground forces were advancing, black armor, glowing weapons, a line of death stretching to the horizon. Vance crouched beside Threx, checking his last rifle charge. All right, big guy, he said softly. We've got one shot. Hit them hard, scare them off, and maybe, just maybe, we'll live long enough to see sunrise. Threx lowered his head beside him. The Warbeast's eyes glowed faintly, like embers ready to ignite. Yeah, Vance said with a crooked smile. Let's go make some noise. He patted the creature's side, then climbed onto its back, gripping the rough ridges between its shoulders. The air was hot, filled with fire and light. Threx roared, wings spreading wide. And together, man and beast launched into the burning sky. The wind screamed as Threx rose into the night. Elias Vance clung to the creature's back, his hands gripping the ridged scales as the air burned around them. Below the base was a storm of fire, explosions, collapsing towers, and soldiers scattering like sparks in the dark. Above, the Dravak fleet blotted out the stars, their ships hanging in the sky like black knives. Every beat of Threx's wings sent shockwaves through the smoke. The beast wasn't flying smoothly. Its left wing was torn, bleeding, and the air hissed through the holes like a wounded whistle, but it didn't stop. It couldn't. Vance pressed a hand against the creature's neck. You got this, big guy, don't quit on me now. Threx let out a deep, thunderous growl, not anger, determination, the kind of sound that said we're not done yet. They soared through the clouds, dodging plasma fire that lit the sky in green flashes. A Dravek fighter screamed toward them, guns blazing. The rounds sliced through the air, narrowly missing Vance's head. Right, he shouted. Threx rolled hard, wings cutting through the smoke, and the fighter's shots went wide. The human could feel the heat of each blast passing too close for comfort. Now, Vance yelled, slamming his boot against the creature's side. Threx understood. With a roar that shook the air, the Warbeast dove straight toward the fighter. The alien pilot didn't even have time to scream before Threx's claws tore through the cockpit, ripping it apart in a shower of fire. The explosion lit the clouds orange. Vance whooped, half crazy with adrenaline. Yeah, that's how we do it. Threx bellowed again, wings beating harder. The two of them banked upward, rising through the smoke like a phoenix reborn from war. On the ground below, the trainer Viarik watched from the command tower, mandibles trembling. The human and the Warbeast, two creatures that should have destroyed each other, were fighting as one. He could hardly believe what he saw. Every strike, every movement was in sync. Where one moved, the other followed. Where one faltered, the other adjusted. It was like watching a storm with a soul. He turned to the comm officer. Get me a link to the fleet. Tell them the human is flying with the beast. The officer blinked, sir. Do it. Above, Vance was losing his breath but not his focus. His hands were blistered from gripping Threx's scales. Smoke stung his eyes, sweat poured down his back, but he didn't care. The sky was alive with chaos, fighters diving, ships burning, and the hum of plasma bolts lighting the clouds. He could hear Threx's labored breathing beneath him, deep and uneven. You're hurt, he said softly. We need to land. The beast growled low in response, defiance. Yeah, I know, Vance muttered. You're stubborn as hell. Another fighter closed in behind them. Vance turned, heart hammering. All right, let's finish this. He aimed his rifle backward and fired. The blast hit the fighter's wing, spinning it out of control. It exploded against the side of a larger ship. Debris rained down, scattering across the valley. Threx roared triumphantly, a sound that made even the clouds tremble. For a moment, they were unstoppable. But then the sky flashed white. A beam from the enemy cruiser tore through the air, slamming into the mountain below. The shockwave hit them like a hammer. Vance was thrown forward, nearly falling off. He clung desperately to the creature's neck as they tumbled through the smoke. Threx, he shouted. The Warbeast roared in pain, wings flailing. The left one caught fire. The two of them dropped fast, too fast. The ground rushed up to meet them. Pull up, Vance screamed. Come on, you can do it. Threx spread its wings, fighting the fall. The wind screamed in Vance's ears. The beast's muscles quivered with effort. Then impact. They crashed hard into the valley floor, sliding through dirt and fire. The world went white, then black, then slowly returned in a haze of smoke and ringing ears. Vance groaned, pushing himself up. His armor was cracked, his body aching. He turned and saw Threx. The Warbeast was down, chest heaving, blood seeping from burns along its side. Its wings twitched weakly. Vance stumbled to its head, falling to his knees beside it. Hey, you still with me?" The creature blinked slowly. Its pupils shrank to thin slits of light. "Don't you dare die on me," Vance whispered. "You saved my life. You don't get to quit before I say so." Threx let out a low rumble, almost a groan. The sound broke something inside Vance. He pressed his forehead against the creature's scales. "You're not just some weapon, you hear me? You're my partner, my friend." The Warbeast's breathing steadied, slow but strong. The ground shook faintly as it tried to lift its head. "That's it," Vance said, voice cracking. "You've got more in you, we both do." He looked up toward the horizon. The battle still raged. The Dravak were advancing, the sky alive with burning ships. He could see escape pods launching from the base, carrying what remained of the recruits. He clenched his fists. "We're not done yet." Viaric's voice crackled through the comm. "Vance, where are you?" "In the valley," Vance replied, coughing. "Threx is hurt but alive." "You must retreat." "Can't," Vance said. "They'll chase the pods. Someone gotta slow them down." There was silence. Then softly Viaric said, "You will die human." Vance looked at Threx, who was struggling to rise. "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly, "but not today." The Warbeast let out one more deep roar, shaking the mountains. Vance climbed onto its back again, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The creature's wings spread wide, torn but still powerful. "Come on," he whispered. Show them what happens when they mess with Earth and her friends." Threx bared its teeth, golden eyes blazing. Together they charged toward the rising smoke, man and beast moving as one. In the distance, the Dravak forces saw something coming out of the haze. Something big, something burning, something that roared like a storm. The last thing they expected was a human riding a Warbeast. But that's exactly what they saw. The sky burned red. Elias Vance could taste the ash in his mouth as Threx carried him higher, climbing through the smoke that swallowed the mountains. Fire trailed behind them from the beast's torn wings, but still they rose. Below, the battlefield stretched for miles, a wasteland of fire and metal. The Alliance outpost was half gone, the Dravak warships still pouring fire into what remained. Escape pods streaked upward like silver tears, desperate to flee the burning ground. Vance gritted his teeth. "Not on my watch." He patted Threx's neck, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You ready, partner?" Threx growled deep in his chest, a sound that rolled through the air like thunder. The Warbeast's golden eyes blazed bright, focused, determined. Together, they turned toward the enemy fleet. The first Dravak gunship spotted them immediately. "Contact," the alien pilot shouted into his comm. "Unidentified aerial target, large organic signature. Wait, what is?" He never finished the sentence. Threx slammed into the ship's side with the force of a meteor. Metal screamed and shattered. The Warbeast's claws ripped through its engines, sending it spinning out of control before exploding in a blinding flash. The shockwave hit Vance hard, nearly throwing him off, but he held tight. The heat washed over his face, searing but fleeting. "That's one," he muttered. Keep counting." They dove into the fray. The battle became chaos. Dravak fighters screamed through the sky, chasing them, firing bursts of green plasma. Vance ducked low against Threx's back as the air lit up around them. The Warbeast twisted and rolled, dodging the shots with sharp, powerful movements that defied its massive size. Every time they got close, Threx struck back, tail slashing, claws tearing, wings beating like thunder. Each motion was deadly, precise, almost graceful. Vance had never seen anything like it. He wasn't riding a monster anymore. He was flying with a legend. He raised his rifle and fired at the fighters that tried to flank them. His shots hit one square in the engine, and it went down in flames. "Nice shot," he yelled to himself, laughing through the smoke. Threx roared in response, the sound echoing across the mountains. On the ground, the survivors of Outpost Theta watched in disbelief. The human and the Warbeast cut through the sky like a storm given life. Viarik stood beside the last group of soldiers preparing to retreat. His antennae trembled as he watched through his binoculars. "Impossible," he whispered. "They are fighting together perfectly." A younger recruit beside him whispered, "Sir, are we witnessing a bonding?" Viarik didn't answer. He lowered the binoculars slowly. "No," he said, his voice quiet. "We are witnessing faith." Back in the air, the fight raged on. A squadron of enemy fighters broke formation, surrounding them. The sky flashed green with plasma bursts. One bolt grazed Threx's shoulder, burning through his hide. The creature roared in pain, spiraling for a moment. "Hold on," Vance shouted, gripping tighter. "Stay with me." He looked down and saw blood dripping along the beast's side, dark and steaming. Anger flared in his chest. "All right," he growled. "You want to play rough?" He grabbed a fallen enemy rifle from the harness on Threx's back, bracing it against his shoulder. As the next fighter swooped in, he fired 3 clean bursts, hitting it dead center. The craft exploded, breaking apart in a rain of debris. Threx steadied again, wings flaring, breathing heavy but strong. "That's it," Vance said. "Right back in it." They dove straight toward the enemy flagship. The flagship was massive, a black dagger hanging in the clouds. Its cannons glowed with power, each shot ripping the air apart. Vance's heart pounded. That's where it ends. Threx let out a low growl that shook the sky itself. Flames curled from his mouth as he beat his wings harder, faster. Together, they streaked toward the ship like a comet of fury and fire. The flagship turned its guns on them. Bolts of plasma filled the air, missing by meters. One struck Threx's right wing, tearing another hole through the membrane. Vance could feel the shock ripple through the creature's body, pain, exhaustion, but also rage. "Come on," he shouted over the roar of battle. "Just a little closer." They dodged between beams of light, climbing higher and higher, until the ship's cannons couldn't aim fast enough. Then Vance saw it, a weak spot, a glowing vent near the ship's top hull. He grinned. "That's our window." Threx spread his wings, giving one final earth-shaking roar. He folded them tight and dove straight toward the vent. The impact hit like an earthquake. Threx's claws tore through metal, ripping the vent open wide. Vance dropped a plasma grenade inside and kicked off the hull. "Light it up," he yelled. The explosion bloomed behind them, fire erupting from the ship's core. The flagship shuddered, then split apart in a series of thunderous blasts that lit the entire valley. The Dravak fleet began to scatter. Their formation broke, retreating into the clouds. They were running. Threx and Vance soared above the burning wreckage, both barely holding on. The Warbeast's breathing was heavy, ragged. Its wings trembled with each flap. Vance placed a hand on its neck, voice soft now. "We did it, partner, they're gone." The Warbeast let out a low, tired rumble. Not a roar this time, but something gentler. "I know," Vance said quietly. "You're hurt, we'll rest soon, I promise." He looked down at the valley below, the flames, the broken towers, the soldiers staring up in awe. For a moment, everything was still. He felt the weight of it all, the pain, the loss, the fire, but beneath it, something stronger, pride. They hadn't just survived, they had won. When they finally landed, the ground shook. Soldiers ran forward, cheering, crying, shouting the human's name. Vance slid off Threx's back and staggered forward, every muscle screaming. He turned, looking up at the beast, battered, bleeding, but alive. Viarik stepped through the crowd, eyes wide with disbelief. "You destroyed their flagship." Vance nodded wearily. Couldn't have done it without him. He rested a hand on Threx's snout. The Warbeast lowered its massive head, eyes soft and calm. Viarik bowed his head slowly, a rare gesture for his kind. "Perhaps I was wrong about you, human. Perhaps fear is not the greatest weapon." Vance smiled faintly. "Nah," he said, "it's trust." The wind swept across the scorched valley, carrying the smell of smoke and victory. The war was far from over, but for now, for this one night, the stars belonged to them. Man and beast. Fear and faith. Together, they had turned the tide. The battlefield was quiet. For the first time in hours, no plasma fire burned through the sky. The air, once full of screams and thunder, had fallen still, filled only with the sound of crackling fires and the slow rhythm of heavy breathing. Elias Vance stood in the middle of the ruins, his armor blackened and torn, his face streaked with blood and ash. Around him, the world glowed orange from the wreckage of enemy ships scattered across the valley. The Dravak fleet was gone, retreated, shattered, beaten. He could hardly believe it. They had done it. He turned, eyes searching through the smoke until he found the shape he was looking for, Threx. The Warbeast lay among the ruins, wings half-folded, chest rising and falling in deep, labored breaths. Its one-sprite scales were dull and scorched, patches of dark blood running down its sides. But those golden eyes were still open, still alive. Vance limped toward it. "Hey," he said softly, voice rough. "You did it, you crazy, beautiful thing, you actually did it." Threx made a low, rumbling sound, deep and tired. Its tail twitched once, sending a small puff of dust into the air. Vance smiled faintly and rested a hand against its massive jaw. The scales were warm, rough under his fingers. "You rest now, all right? You've earned it." The Warbeast blinked slowly, as if agreeing. Its breath came out in a deep sigh that stirred the dirt around them. Vance sat down beside its head, his legs giving out under him. He leaned back against Threx's snout and looked up at the sky. The clouds were breaking apart now, showing the stars beyond, the same stars that had watched them fight, bleed, and survive. "They'll tell stories about you," Vance murmured. "About the beast that fought beside a human," he chuckled softly. "Bet they won't believe half of it." Minutes later, the sound of footsteps echoed through the broken valley. The surviving soldiers were returning, some limping, some carrying the wounded, all covered in smoke and dust. Behind them came Viarik, the insectoid trainer, his antennae hanging low, his expression unreadable. When they reached Vance, everyone stopped. There, in the middle of the ruined battlefield, sat the human, resting against the head of the creature that once terrified them all. The silence was thick, then Viarik stepped forward. "You should be dead," he said quietly. Vance looked up, smirking faintly. "You say that a lot." "This time I mean it," the trainer replied. "You faced the Dravak fleet with a wounded beast and no army." "And we won," Vance said simply. The trainer's mandibles twitched. "Yes, you did." He walked closer, eyes scanning the Warbeast's wounds. It fought beyond its limits. Such endurance is unnatural. "Not unnatural," Vance said, "just loyal." The alien nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in his many eyes. "I misjudged you, human, you and your creature. I believed fear kept warriors alive, but perhaps it is something else." "Maybe it's trust," Vance said softly. Viarik looked at him for a long moment, then bowed, a gesture no one had ever seen him make. "For saving this outpost and every life here, you have my gratitude." Vance waved a hand dismissively. "Save it for him," he patted Threx's snout. "He did the heavy lifting." The Warbeast gave a small rumble, almost like a laugh. The soldiers around them smiled, the tension melting for the first time in days. Hours passed, the wounded were cared for, fires put out, and the dead honored. The night deepened, stars bright and sharp above the ruined world. Vance stayed beside Threx, refusing to leave even when the medics insisted he rest. He fed the creature water from a cracked canteen, whispering nonsense between sips, just to keep it awake. "You did good, big guy," he said softly. "You showed them what you are, not a weapon, not a monster, just a soul trying to be free." Threx blinked, eyes glimmering faintly in the starlight. It nudged him gently with its snout, the movement so light that it almost broke his heart. "You know," Vance continued, smiling through the ache in his chest, "when I first saw you, I thought you were gonna eat me." The beast snorted, a puff of hot air blowing Vance's hair back. Yeah, he laughed hoarsely. "Guess we both surprised each other." By dawn, the rescue ships had arrived. They came in low, cutting through the haze, their lights sweeping over the valley. Commanders stepped out, stunned by what they saw. One human and a massive warbeast standing side by side amidst the ruins, as if they had walked out of myth. When they approached, Viarik told the story himself. He spoke of the battle, of the bonding, of the human who defied fear and the beast that found faith. The soldiers listened in silence. When he finished, the commander, a tall, silver-skinned officer from the Kalari worlds, looked at Vance. "Private Elias Vance," she said, her voice strong but warm. "By order of the Alliance High Command, you are to be recognized for bravery beyond reason." Vance rubbed the back of his neck, looking embarrassed. Thanks, but I wasn't exactly alone." He nodded toward Threx. The Warbeast shifted, wings rustling weakly. The officer smiled faintly. "Then the honor shall be shared." She turned to her aide. "Record it. Let history show this victory belonged not to fear, not to command, but to courage and trust." When the sun rose, it painted the valley in gold. The fires had gone out, and the wind carried the scent of new beginnings. Vance stood beside Threx, looking at the horizon. The creature's wounds were healing, slowly but surely. It raised its head, letting the first light touch its scales. Vance smiled. "See that? That's your sky now. You earned it." The Warbeast rumbled low, eyes glinting softly. It bent its head down, pressing its snout gently against the human's chest. Vance rested his hands against the creature's jaw. For a long time, neither of them moved. They didn't need to. The bond between them said everything that words couldn't. When the recruits told the story years later, they would always begin the same way. "It'll bite anyone who moves," the trainer warned. And then they'd laugh, because everyone knew how it ended. They tell of the day a human moved anyway, walked straight into the jaws of death, and came out with a friend that saved them all.